Good morning. Thank you for dropping by. I'm the old gardener. I've been gardening for more than 75 years, and I remember them. Started when I was very young. Grew up on a farm. I've even taught gardening, taught in colleges, and I love to tell people about gardening. Today we're going to be talking about containers, how to choose the right container, and how to have a plant that thrives in a container. First of all, there's some just basic things you need to understand. First one is that when a plant is in a container like this, it's in an artificial hole. Now, if this plant was planted in the ground, the roots would have the freedom to expand and get the nutrients and the moisture it needed. But because it's in a container like this, it can't get up and move around and get the nutrients it needs. There's several options. There's lots of good granulated, slow release fertilizer like Osmocote and some of those that you can apply to plants that will last 3 to 6 months. There's also things like Miracle-Gro, and you can find the big box has their own brands of pretty decent fertilizer that you can use on a regular basis. Read the directions, because some say water with the fertilizer mixture that dissolves in water every 2 weeks, some say every week, some say once a month. But read the directions and follow the directions. Containers, you can grow in almost anything. I've seen petunias and flowers growing in old boots and tennis shoes. Well, it's not what I would do, but I enjoy containers. It's very important to get the right shape of container. Even though this is a patio variety of tomato and it's a very thick, heavy stem on this, it usually does not require staking, but that's not the real problem. The real problem is if you put this on your patio, it has a very, very small base. It doesn't take much wind to blow it over, especially when it's loaded with tomatoes and it gets top heavy. So I always choose a container with a larger, wider base. Now, of course, this container is not suitable for a big tomato, but it's very suitable for a small flower blooming plant or succulent that you may want to put in here, because it's going to take a lot of wind to topple this one over. I want to show you what I consider to be a very neat trick and something that I've seen all over the world used in gardening, especially on decks and patios. So here we go. It's called a pillar garden or bag garden. So what is a bag garden or pillar garden? Well, it's nothing more than a bag of potting soil, a good brand. It doesn't have to be Miracle-Gro. It can be, there's lots of good potting soil. But you know, if you're building a house or a building, you have to have a good foundation. And a plant in a container has to have a good foundation, whether it's in a bag or whether it's in a container. Let me tell you an interesting story. Many years ago, about 35 years ago, I used to have a television show called The Weekend Gardener, and that's just for history. I can't use that name anymore because it's been taken over by others, and rightfully so. But I got a letter from the Department of Agriculture informing me that I had been calling container plants pot plants, and that pot plants were illegal, and to please stop using that to describe containers. So no more pot plants, it's containers. Containers have to meet the demands of what you're going to be planting in them. Now remember, a container has to have good drainage, and most plants like to have their roots grow in what is a dark area. You know, a ball jar makes a beautiful container to plant stuff in, but because this is an old antique jar, okay? I bet it's close to 100 years old. And the roots will stay away from the interior of that jar, many plants will not even prosper in it because, first of all, it doesn't have a drainage, and second, it's because the light penetrates it, and they don't like the roots being in the light because the top of the plant is to be in the light, the foliage. But anyway, here we go. Let me show you how you do this. First of all, we just punch some holes in the bottom of it so that it will have good drainage. And you can use any size bag. This happens to be a small bag, and it's got 6 months feeding in this particular formula. And this is a potting mix, even though I can't call them potted plants, Miracle-Gro can. It's a potting mix, and this is how you do it. The first thing you do, and like I said, you can use any size potting soil, the bigger the better. Don't skimp because sometimes the best potting soil is the most expensive potting soil. But choose a bag that's large enough to support the life of what you're growing. And I just punch several holes in this because you don't want for it not to drain well, all right? And then what you do, and this is also good for rooting plants, and that's a subject for another show. But with my very sharp Uncle Henry knife here, I'm just cutting us a window of opportunity to have a little garden. And there's our potting soil. Now what we'll do, this would be a great little garden for some lettuce, spinach, especially a bigger one. I knew a lady one time that bought at yard sales, garage sales, a couple of Western flower wagons, you know, like kids use. Here's some examples. That's a sunflower that's gotten in the picture there. A Rebecca, I think, may be what it is. And a begonia in a container that's leaning to one side. But here is a plant, a nice flowering, low-growing plant, cabracha, that's growing in a bag of potting soil. Now, you say, but I don't want that potting soil showing. Well, you don't have to show the potting soil. Mulch up around the bag and hide it. And you can put it on a deck. I know some people who, and I've done this, I've built little shallow growing boxes for it. It works terrifically. All right. Certainly that's not all there is to know about container plants. There's a lot more. And we'll do another show about them later. And like I said, these little bags are great for rooting plants in the spring. And we'll talk more about that too with other videos. But we want you to enjoy gardening. You know, for the senior citizen like me, gardening is fun. And it keeps me limber. It keeps me popular in my neighborhood too, because people enjoy the produce and we give it away. And that's what, you know, the fun of it is. Gardening is for the fun, the flavor, and the exercise. So enjoy gardening. Get out and do something. There's no excuse. Even if you live in an apartment, you got a patio, you got a deck or someplace that you can grow something. Maybe even a sunny window where you can grow something. Hey, be a good citizen. Stand up for those things that make America better. Whatever you may think it is. Be active. Express yourself. Glorify God. See you in church this Sunday. Have a great time gardening.